The power of belief. Once upon a time, in a quiet town nestled between rolling hills, there lived a young pianist named Leo. From the moment he touched the keys of a piano as a child, he was hooked. The music flowed through him like a river, and he spent hours each day playing, learning, and experimenting with new melodies. His small apartment was filled with sheet music and old piano records, each note representing a piece of his soul. But despite his talent, Leo struggled to find an audience for his music. The local music scene was dominated by other musicians, and his compositions were often overlooked. He worked at a coffee shop to make ends meet, serving drinks and sweeping floors, all while dreaming of the day his music would be heard by the world. One evening, after a particularly tough day, Leo sat at his piano, staring at the keys. His fingers hovered over them, but no melody came. He wondered if he should give up on his dream of becoming a renowned pianist. Perhaps he wasn't good enough. Just as he was about to close the piano, a soft knock came at his door. It was Mrs. Thompson, his elderly neighbour, who always had a kind word to say and a cup of tea ready to offer. "Hello, dear," she said warmly, entering the room with a gentle smile. "I saw your light on and thought I'd check on you." Leo forced a smile in return. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson. I'm just struggling with my music. I feel like no one will ever care about it." Mrs. Thompson walked over to the piano and looked at the sheet music scattered on the stand. "Your music is beautiful, Leo. You have such a gift." "Thank you," Leo said, his voice laced with doubt. "But sometimes I wonder if it's worth it. Maybe I just don't have what it takes." Mrs. Thompson took a deep breath and sat beside him. "You know, when I was young, I wanted to be a writer. I wrote stories and poems, but I never had the courage to share them. I was afraid they weren't good enough. But one day, I realized something important. If I don't believe in my own worth, no one else will." Leo looked at her, intrigued. "But how do you find that belief?" She smiled softly. "It starts with trusting in your own talent. Every artist faces doubt, but it's in those moments that you must remind yourself of why you started. Keep playing, keep creating, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how many people listen to your music, but by how it makes you feel when you play." The next morning, Leo woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He sat at his piano and began to play, not for anyone else, but for himself. His fingers danced over the keys, and soon a new piece began to take shape, a melody filled with his emotions, his hopes, and his dreams. A few weeks later, Leo's music caught the attention of a famous composer who happened to be passing through town. The composer was moved by Leo's unique style and invited him to perform at a prestigious concert hall. The night of the performance, Leo stood backstage, nervous yet excited. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the stage, sat at the grand piano, and began to play. The audience was captivated. The music flowed from him effortlessly, and the crowd was moved by the raw emotion in his performance. By the end of the night, several music producers approached Leo with offers to record his compositions. As the evening came to a close, Leo spotted Mrs. Thompson in the audience. He walked over to her, his heart full of gratitude, and hugged her tightly. "Thank you for believing in me," he whispered. Mrs. Thompson smiled, her eyes twinkling. "You did this, Leo. You found your worth and shared your gift with the world." From that day on, Leo continued to compose and perform, always remembering that his worth wasn't defined by external validation, but by his belief in himself and the joy he found in making music. And as he shared his melodies with the world, he inspired others to recognize and embrace their own worth as well. Let's learn some words. Passionate. Meaning. Having a strong feeling or interest in something. Example. Leo was passionate about playing the piano and composing music. Make ends meet. Meaning. To earn just enough money to cover basic living expenses. Example. Leo worked at a coffee shop to make ends meet while pursuing his music. Crept. Meaning. moved slowly and quietly. Example, doubt crept into Leo's mind, but he pushed it away. Easel, meaning, a stand used by artists to hold a canvas while they paint. Example, Leo set up his music sheet on the piano, much like an artist setting up on an easel. Tinged, meaning, slightly coloured or affected by a certain quality or emotion. Example, Leo's voice was tinged with hesitation as he spoke about his music. Piqued, meaning stimulated interest or curiosity. Example, Leo's curiosity piqued when he heard the famous composer would be in town. Don't forget like, share and subscribe.